if Ed were here, he would give each and every one of you a big, juicy kiss. And I say that only because he's with me every day. And that'll be there forever. Thank you.
You ready to begin this interrogation?
Sure, but whatever you said. I am deaf.
All right, Al.
Yeah.
Tell us the best thing about being a musician.
It gives you the sense of, even though it's an illusion, that you're free to go and roam the planet and bring happiness to the people you play for. And in your own little way, you think you're changing the world for the better. I don't know if that's what we accomplished or if that's what but that's the goal.
And what's the worst thing about being a musician?
Actually, there is no worst part. You know, I was taught that for all the highs, you're going to have an equal amount of lows. So it's almost like a precursor of the nasty times when you're riding high, and then all of a sudden you experience the lows. I don't know if it's a metaphysical, physical fact, or it's a superstition, or whether it's Islander voodoo. But in the balance and the order of the universe, every time you have a high, you're going to have a low somewhere. So, but you don't do the lows in public. You create the illusion that we're always happy.
Tell us, let's start this where we started the book. Tell us about your earliest memories of sound. Like, what was the soundtrack before you even left Holland? What were the sounds of Holland in your childhood?
Pile drivers.
Yeah.
They do a lot of reclamation of land because the whole country's underwater. So the first thing that I can remember is the noise of the poof, poof, all day long. The noise it made, it drove me nuts. But I think it has something to do with, and I shouldn't make drumming such a shallow art, but it has something to do with me becoming a drummer, subconsciously, I think.
And then another big sound of your childhood was the sound of your father playing music.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what kind of music they played and who were some of the players.
My dad was a jazz musician. When jazz went out of style, which is something we learned early on, be careful what kind of music you play, because if it goes out of style, you're not eating. And that's the truth. So to make ends meet, he joined the Air Force in the Dutch Air Force. Everybody, more or less, where we lived was either in the military or was a musician doing something going on the road with circuses. In general, as a musician, you whatever job comes your way, you take it, because you got to eat. So from that standpoint of how we looked at music and approached it as an entity or an art, it was to put food on the table, which makes it a little more serious than thinking about what song am I play tonight because we're playing for a large opening of a gallery. No, play and you get the job or you don't eat. And it was that simple. So that was always the underlying motivation for doing the best that you could, not only for the art that you're making, and we call it art for good reason, but not only for the sake of what you're doing for the art, but for the economic sense. And like I said, unfortunately, music is one of the discretionary choices you have in life. So it's the last thing people want to spend money on when they don't have very much. And therefore, my dad joined the Air Force, where he had a guaranteed income. He gets to stand in the freezing cold rain on the tarmac welcoming dignitaries, right? And he hated it, but he did it. It taught me a lot about how to deal with life as a man or as a human being. You do what you gotta do. It's that simple.
So I have your questions, and I'm going to put them in throughout my questions. So a member of the audience wants to know if there's anyone you still speak Dutch with.
It's fading, and I do it on an entertainment level with one of my remaining cousins in Holland, But she has to really slow down because otherwise I can't make sense of it. The level of Dutch that my brother and I spoke was probably about 6th grade level. And my opinion was there wasn't much need to go beyond that because people don't stay there that long. They go on to other places in the world. And now that English is probably the major language, you opt for English. But Dutch is one of those languages that for some reason, I mean, it's not universal. What are you going to do with it? You know, Holland is a very small country. It's half the size of California, so physically, geographically. So, other than the fact that at one point they were the largest trading company in the world, the Dutch West Indies Company, if you compare that to Apple, Mac, or whatever you call it, the Bezos and Elon Musk, and you combine those companies and their income, the Dutch West Indies was like a country, or a whole, it was half the planet. And it was amazing what they did back then. But like anything else, there comes a time when there's a decline, and then it went away.
Yeah, this was a different audience question that we should stick in here. Another member of the audience asked if you have been back to Indonesia and if you have family there, where your mom was from.
I've never been to
You've
Indonesia.
never been?
No.
Do you want to go ever?
We're going to go. My wife has been to Bali, and one of Ed's doctors practices in Bali. But Indonesia itself is a country in flux, and it's really a lot of stuff going on right now. If somebody were to ask me, where do you want to go on the planet, Indonesia would not be my first choice.
Where's your first choice?
That's a good question. I don't know.
All right, we can return to that
I'm waiting. I heard that Greenland is going to be, all the ice is going to be melting, and somebody's going to buy it.
Okay, talk to us about the rip and upright. Tell us about what that instrument meant in your household and to your mom.
The piano was the center of everything. The joy, pain, frustration. No, I'm serious. Our mother wanted us to be legitimate, meaning to be respected, to wear a shirt with a collar, to salute when one of them walked in. Not that part, but it meant a lot to her to be validated. You know, she came from a country where she was a second-class citizen, and this was during the remaining part of the Western colonialization of all the countries that were rich in gold and tea and spices and trade. You know, and it was very much accepted that the Western countries ran the place. But when my parents left Indonesia, because my dad lived there for a few years until they decided they wanted freedom, they came to Holland. So then the shoe was on the other foot. Now, first it was my dad was the white man. Can I use that language? He was the white man. Yeah, you know. Let me check. He was in the. I gotta tell you, man. But he was, you know, when we had a small household, so you hear everything, and the constant arguing about the position of where we stood in the hierarchy of humans on this planet. It went back and forth. But it also taught me that you can balance and find a way through all that and try to figure out something better if you really put an effort into it. I'm probably overstating the fact, but when Mr. Sukarno came in and took over Indonesia and kicked all the white people out, my dad had to go, just like that. They threw him out. We don't want you here. Get the hell out. Well, they're married now, so what are they going to do? So my mom went with them. They go to Holland. Now she's on the opposite side of the coin. My dad's the local, if you will, and she's the other one. We did that for a number of years until it became completely unbearable, and then we left. So it taught me early on that you can move around. If there's something you don't like, go somewhere else. You know, if you can afford it, if you can do it, if your roots aren't too deep, adapt.
And why California? What did she heard and who summoned you?
I'm laughing because I hear a lot of stuff about immigration these days on the television, but I have to be serious about it. Is the vetting process of being able to come to America was like a 2 or 3 year process. You don't just walk in and say, hey, I'm here, let me do my shit. Excuse me. So, you had to have a sponsor, you had to have a house ready, there had to be a job lined up, and obviously you had to have no record of any kind of serious misdemeanor or any serious offense. So all these things were arranged by my mom's sister, which put her, of course, in a very dominant position because she helped us get there. Now she's the one who kind of bosses everybody around. But that ended very quickly when my father was thrown in the can for possession of marijuana.
No, but it wasn't. Tell why.
Well, okay. Well, he was working in a factory. He couldn't find work as a musician. That's the other thing is you learn very quickly. You better adopt and find other ways to feed the family. So he found a job through my cousin, who was the foreman, at a machine shop. And he worked what was called the swing shift from 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 2 in the morning. So he would hang out with the other guys that worked there, and they were mostly Hispanic folk. And so he gets a ride home with one of them, and the guy's smoking a joint. Right? The whole car smells like pot. My dad used to roll his own cigarettes. Couldn't speak a word of English. Maybe yes, no, that's it. So on the way home, they get pulled over, which is only like a 4-minute ride, 4-mile ride. And on the way home, the car gets pulled over because of burnt out taillight. They smelled the pot. My dad's tobacco fell forward because they got panicked and slammed on the brakes. They asked him probably, hey, is that your pot? And he said, yes. And they took it. And they took him in. Okay, that was bad enough. We didn't know that in America you can bail people out. So my dad, he was in the glass house for 12 days, I think. Yeah, he was tough though. But I think it was more of a situation where the family had slight, if not more than slight, racial issues with my dad being married to their sister. So there's always a competition going on. She married the white guy, but he's the drunk. And so when they had the opportunity to kind of semi-stick it to him, they did.
By not telling you.
By not telling him, not telling us that we could bail him out. He was gone for 2 weeks, which is, and you're gonna look at me and go, well, you didn't notice he was gone for 2 weeks? Well, he's a musician. I saw him once every month, that was it. He had to work. But that really left us with a bad impression of the whole situation. And we weren't happy about it. It cost us $250 to get him out, which at that time, on a salary of about $60 a week, that's a long time.
And what's it like for you and Ed as kids trying to integrate when you don't speak any English?
I was okay with it. I'm looking at it as an opportunity. I see all these people, and they seem to be having a lot of fun. They all have at that time they all had crew cuts, flat tops. Ed and I had this bush. But more importantly, excuse me, I saw it as an opportunity to do something with music, because on the boat over to America, my dad hustled a deal where we played at the lunchtime for the lunch parade, or whatever you call it, right? On the ship. And because of that, we get to sit at the captain's table. This is all in the book, but if I can elaborate on it, it's not like we were conniving, but when you're poor, you look for opportunity everywhere. How can I get in that one? How can I do that? And so when we saw that playing the piano got us at the captain's table, okay, I get it. This is good to be a musician. Ed, let's do it. My dad used to have an expression, je moet er iets van maken. And that means you got to make something out of it. No matter what comes your way, make something out of it. And you learn to make a lot out of a little. And that's how we started. And I think that carried over to Ed making his own guitars and his instruments, whether he recognized what that pattern was from, or because he didn't need to do it. But we were so, this is the word, ingrained with that kind of a mentality. We never had anything new.
Tell us about your first professional gig. I mean, your elementary school, your first professional gig.
You know, I think when Ed and I were done with the piano at a point in time when the Beatles came. So we decided to make a rock and roll band. I would play sax and Ed would play piano because that's all that was there.
Because the piano came with you. The
piano
on the boat from Holland.
Yes, the piano, and it was when it arrived in LA, it was nothing but a bunch of splinters and broken everything. They had to really put it all back together again. But my mom, she was the driving force. You know, the men like to think they do all the shit, but it's the women. The women are the ones who crack the whip. Don't forget that. So she insisted that the piano would be put together again and that we take lessons, which, you know, at that time, you don't really think much past the fact, whatever your parents say, that's the law. You got to practice, go practice. You're not going to argue with them. They're the ones that give you the food, right? So the piano really became the centerpiece of not only the house, but of our social life. And when guests came over, we were forced to play. And my mother she loved to rub other people's faces and the fact that we were lucky enough to be talented. I hated it. You know, I don't want to put myself on display. Besides, I like these people. Why would I do that, right? But that was the kind of the subtle undertones and the subtext of everything that we did. Our cousins were not that fortunate, so we constantly had a running battle with them until the very end. We just said, you know, I don't want to do this anymore. See you later. This is not. If you have the chance and the opportunity to walk away from a toxic situation, do it. Don't stick around and wait for it to get better, because it ain't.
How did you guys liberate yourselves from the piano? How did you unchain yourself from that ribbon?
Well, you have to remember, my dad would do a lot of gigs where he would drag us along, and they would always have a piano there. But neither one of us could really improvise. We could read sheet music and play the classics, from Beethoven to Mozart, the finger exercises up the yin-yang. But when it came to improvising jazz, it was very difficult because you'd have to know the instrument better and more intimately than just the notes of what was on the sheet. I forgot the question. I forgot the song too.
I kind of forget the question too. What I want to hear about is how you freed yourself from the piano, how you managed to say to how both of you managed to say to your mom, we're not going to do this. We want to be in a rock and roll band. This woman who's always wanted you to be respected.
You know, we kind of eased into that because the piano was still part of it, and because one of the first bands that we tried to emulate was the Dave Clark Five, and they had a keyboard player. I think was it Denny Payne? No, who was the keyboard player? Anyway, so we incorporated with what we had. You know, again, like I said, you make do with what you got. If we didn't have a guitar, let's play piano. We'll make it work. So, but as the years went by, we could finally afford a guitar. And I took flamenco lessons to no great result. You know, I mean, you know, this is the other thing is when you play an instrument, you can fool some of the people some of the time. But if you're honest with yourself, you look in the mirror and go, nah, this ain't happening. It ain't happening. You know, we were taught to be very critical of ourselves and don't be BSing anybody. So, but the standards of the people who we played with was much higher than you find in the average because my dad's friends were all musicians, professional musicians. So, and they didn't give you compliments for nothing. So don't expect anything. So we went to rock and roll, and that seemed to speak to us a lot more than classical music.
What about rock and roll spoke to you?
The way it made you feel, the way it was, I hate to say it was easier, because it wasn't. The illusion is that it was easier, but it was just something that, if you can't feel it, you're not going to convince yourself intellectually. You know, making music is not an intellectual exercise. It's an emotional, and you know, you feel it. It's like when you feel you want to get up and dance. It's that simple. But it was one of those things where we were able to make the music, and then we got gigs, and one thing led to another, and before you know it, we were looking for Dave.
What do you remember about the first time you played with your dad on stage?
I was scared shitless. You know, it was because I'll tell you why. Because he was to be respected. He may have been a prankster and a jokester, but when it came to making music, you know, even though he didn't look like he was serious, he practiced 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. He was very much involved with how the sound of his aperture was. As a matter of fact, he's one of the few clarinet players who has a really woody sound instead of a glassy. I don't know how to explain it. Anybody who's heard a glassy clarinet will know what I'm talking about. But he has a really woody sound, and that makes it. When we watched him get his instrument to sound the way he wanted it, it was just fascinating. He would spend hours and hours adjusting the reeds and adjusting the mouthpiece and adjusting the aperture and the rest of the stuff until he got the sound he wanted. And then he would move on to the next reed. So, but that really stuck in our memory for a long time. It's very important. The sound is what's important. That's what conveys the feeling and the emotion. And it's certainly not a stretch to try to compare the sound of a Western instrument like a clarinet to the sound of an Eastern instrument. If it's a string instrument, that's great. It doesn't matter what it is, but certain sounds evoke certain emotions. And all you need to do is listen to a fireman's whistle, and you'll know what I'm talking about. So that was very much part of our upbringing. And I think we carried it throughout most of our lives. You know, Ed used to call it sound chasing. And he doesn't need to explain it to me. I get it. That's what we both do. We both do that. Our instrument is our voice. This is how we connect with the world, and I want it to sound the way I want it to sound. And that's been, Ed and I had a running battle with every engineer, producer, man, you name it. Anybody who is not in the band, you have a battle with, just to get to where we wanted to go. And it was important.
A member of the audience wants to know, you guys want to clap a little? A member of the audience wants to know when you first became aware of Ed's virtuosic talent on the guitar.
That's a good question. Probably when we, because in the music world, if you will, Ed and I, as 12-year-olds, we're hanging out with adults and learning things that we probably shouldn't have learned. But one of the first guys that we played with was a guy named Dan Scruggs, and he was a big John Mayall fan, and he was our first introduction to the blues, the really better level blues than what you normally hear. These guys were, and also that's how I learned about Ginger Baker, and I don't remember the other players in the band, but so Dan Scruggs opened a whole different arena of different music that we were not really familiar with, because you didn't have the internet, you didn't have radio blasting all this different stuff. You had records, and then you had word of mouth. And through that, we learned one thing from one to the next and the next. When we saw Woodstock, I know I'm jumping from year to year, but to my mind, it's kind of connected like that. When we saw Woodstock and Alvin Lee played Going Home, Ed looked at it and whatever. Within a couple of days, he played it note for note. And my jaw dropped, and I'm going, Jesus Christ. Well, Ed, take my guitar, please. The story about me practicing more than he is, well, it's something Ed made up, I think. But the fact was, ain't no way in hell I'll ever be as good as that. Okay. I know what I can, and I know what I can't do. And if you don't know both, then you're in serious trouble. You have to know where your limit is.
Will you read us this page from the book about the experience of when you discovered Ed's talent?
This one about the gun?
Yeah.
Okay. My dad was in the military, so there were a lot of guns around. When we were little, we had this toy gun, a little Mattel shotgun. Ed and I got into it one day over whose turn it was to play with the thing. My dad comes up, grabs the gun, breaks it in half, and he says, "Here, now you each have a piece." It broke my heart, but it showed me 100% of nothing is nothing. My dad, the King Solomon of Pasadena, was was remarkable in the way he would teach us. It was just little tidbits here and there, and maybe a couple of years you'd realize, oh, that's what he meant. It's kind of like that wax on, wax off thing. Right? It was just little tidbits. Okay. Oh, so that's what he meant. And the most important thing he taught us with that gun, and in 100 other ways, was to stick together. Because you're much better united than you are apart. Whether it's, I want to throw a little extra thing in there, just like a country or anything else, a team or a team or a dream or anything that you want to pursue in this lifetime. A different way that my dad had taught me was that if you take a flashlight and you point it at a door, what do you see? You see a dot of light. If you take that light and you focus it and it becomes a laser, it cuts right through that door. That's what you need to do. Focus your attention and you will get there. Don't stop. I'll pick it up where I left off. So when it became clear that Ed had this gift that he did, I was thinking, that's getting our foot in the door. Ed's talent was an asset, not just to me, not just to him. It was an asset to our band, this thing that was bigger than us, that was going to be the vehicle for our dreams. And of course, the band was more or less imaginary at that point. But if Ed could play guitar like that, we had something else. We had something nobody else ever would. I played guitar first, and I didn't have that. This is you, man. This is how I felt. Just play, Ed. The rest will take care of itself. And that, I meant that from the bottom of my heart. You know, Ed, just play.
All right, so what did you guys think the first time you heard Roth play?
You know, Dave was playing at a place called the Ice House, and he had an acoustic guitar, and it looked to me like it was a little bit more theatrical in the way he was dressed than anything musical. It takes a lot of different pieces. So we thought at one point we need a singer, because Ed was getting tired of singing, and it was just that it would open up so many different more possibilities if we had a singer. Dave had been cruising around the periphery of the crowd that we were with, so one day we invited him to come and try it out to see how it would work. I still remember we were in the living room, and we decided on a song called "Still Alive and Well" by Edgar Winter. It's a very syncopated song, and it really has to be in the pocket, or else it sounds like slop. I've been called a number of things. So we got together, and I kind of exaggerate what happened, and that is that we started playing the song, and by the time we were done, Dave finally took the first word, which is a slight exaggeration, but he had a really long drawl. When it was apparent that this was not going to work, the first thing Ed did is he left the room. All yours, Al. Oddly enough, I must say I had nothing but respect for him for Dave, because he was there. He gave it a best shot, and it was not something that from my view, he did not take it lightly. So all I could say was, "Hey, man, I'm sorry, but I don't think this is going to work." So we left on amicable terms until the next 2 years go by. Everybody in town is either going to college, they go out, and they do whatever they do. there's only a few people left who are actually serious about pursuing a life in music. And I mean a life. It's a full-time job. So we thought we'd try it again. There were a couple of things that happened in between that were not so pleasant. One of them was a park that we usually played at. Ed and I felt like we were big-time guys, right? So we had a manager. The manager cut the deal. He shows up. He goes, "Okay, guys, I got you the gig. What
Like
about
a little kid, like a manager who was like
Oh, yeah.
a child.
We were 13.
Yeah.
But, you know, I seen how the adults did it. So Ed and I get there first, as always, because you want to make sure that everything is, you want to feel comfortable with the surroundings so you can just be relaxed, or at least be a little bit more relaxed than you would normally be. So we get there, there's no stage, there's nothing, there's no sound system, no lights, and I get the park guy walks up and I ask him, "So where's all the gear?" And he says, "What do you mean, where's all the gear? You're supposed to bring it." And I said, "What the hell are you talking about?" Because your manager said you're bringing the sound. And long story short, it gets into a semi-altercation. He was 3 times my size, so I'm not going to take him on. But long and short, Ed and I left. I don't want to be here. So we come back an hour later, maybe 2 hours, after having had a couple of beers. I probably shouldn't be saying this. We started drinking early, so.
How early?
6. Yeah. Don't do it. So we came.
The month over here.
So we came back, and lo and behold, there's another band playing, and we're going, "What the hell was this?" You know, it turns out it was Dave's band. So we're standing out there. We're not too happy about it all, but what the hell? Let's just listen to the band. A couple of the guys we knew, the Camorra brothers, and I knew the bass player and I knew the drummer. I didn't know Dave yet. So, you know, in your infinite wisdom of having false courage with this, you walk up and say, "Hey man, what the hell are you doing here?" And push comes to shove, and the park guy got really pissed off, and he was a very muscular guy. He starts pushing people around, and then some guy pulls a knife. Now it's not playtime anymore, okay? Now it's bigger time. Put the fucking knife away, pal. And they got into it. They arrested him. But that was my introduction to Dave's band. So I thought it was appropriate and fitting in the context of what rock and roll was doing at the time, which is causing nothing but trouble.
And also, from the beginning, it's conflict between you guys. It's a mix. It's whose sensibility is going to win out in any one moment because they're so antithetical, right?
Yeah. But I keep saying my dad this and that, but he really was our mentor in every aspect of what we did. And he said, you know, your eye wants something too. That's how he said it to me. And this is at a time when you had, what was it? In concert, you had Doug Kirshner's,
Where you'd see Liberace on TV, you'd watch with your dad,
Here's how he would teach us. We're watching one of those entertainment things, because we're always going in and out. We got a gig, we got to come back. We came home to recharge. As we're watching, this guy gets up and plays the piano, but before he sits down, he brings a candelabra and puts it on the piano. Very smart. You'll never forget him because of the candelabra. And that's what you need. You need a visual something that connects all the pieces that makes it easier for people to remember you. Because the reality of what we do is, in any given moment, 80% of the people are not musicians. They don't really care. Well, they do or they don't, but not on the level that we care. You know, we nitpick everything. So to get that point, and it is entertainment, by the way. I think to dwell too much on the seriousness of making music that's not what we do. That's not what any musician should do. The most important thing my dad said was to remember is that you play music. You don't work it. You work the gig, but you don't work the music. And
also, I think he told you people don't come to hear the band, they come to see the band.
Well,
so you get Dave and he's your candelabra.
Yeah, well, it was no mystery to me, you know, and I had to do some arm twisting with Ed, but the way Ed and I made decisions is that if one of us wanted to do it and the other one didn't, then we wouldn't do it. If both of us were in agreement, then we would do it. I don't know, for no other reason than just to be equitable in how we approached what we did. So the last time that we, like I said, everybody was leaving town, and the people who were serious about music were very few left. Ed and I went to Dave's house to try it one more time. We'd been gigging, and we were paying a lot of money to his PA, and it just didn't make any sense to me. Ed, why do we pay him $20 a night for a PA? If he's in the band, we can save $20, plus he's got a little Opal. You gotta combine everything, man. You gotta make them work, stretch. So we went to his house, and long story short, we drank a few shots of this, that, and he was very entertaining and very articulate and very convincing in that he should be in the band. And so at the end of the night, I'm combined. Not me, but Ed and I are going over all the things that our dad had said, and we said yes, just like that. You're in. And the funny thing was, and it was very memorable, and I think even Dave will say this, is the first thing he said to us, yeah, but you guys better be better dressed, right? And I felt like saying, you know, Dave, we don't need to be told. You know, it was common sense and obvious that we needed to get out of our cords and plaid shirts. Although when Nirvana came along, we'd fit right in, right? But it was really, I think what the real reason why we did all those things is because to be a professional and to have respect for your stage. There was a time and place, not anybody could walk on that stage. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but Dave used to scrub the stage because it's a sign of respect. This is what brings your food. This is what gives you your job. You should be respectful of it. So that ultimately is a big deal for the whole, what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know yet.
Oh.
Give me a little more.
So when Dave said, yeah, he wanted to be in the band, we said, okay, good, you're good to go. And we knew we had to get better dressed. I mean, I hate to use that terminology, but that's what we did.
You knew you had to put on a show.
The show came by itself, really, actually. We were very high energy. We couldn't sit still. And you add a couple of other elements into the mix. But no, you're there to be part of a communal experience. Whether it's a tribal dance or whether it's a rock and roll dance, it's all the same to me. It's a bunch of people enjoying life and just expressing themselves. That's all there is to it, you know.
Can you describe the scene at the backyard parties in Pasadena where you guys started out playing? What were they like? I know half of you were there.
Little by little, they started escalating in attendance, and until at one point, we had like 3,000 or 4,000 people out there, and we had some technical problems, so things were delayed. They were all drinking, and people got antsy. When the police came, for God knows what reason, I mean, nobody's really doing anything out of that they wouldn't do at a football game. So I don't know what the big deal was, but they came and they started arresting people. And we had some cars turned over. What? Now, I hope that Dennis doesn't read this, but the house we were playing at his father was a sheriff. I didn't tell Dave. So, but the whole point was we're not there to cause trouble. Because, that's the last thing we want. We worked hard to try to get this thing to really be a creative expression, and our standards were high. We know what we like, we know what we want to hear, and we know what we want to present. And also, the last element is we are a reflection of our audience. The audience and we are the same. We're one. There is no delineation or separation.
And what's it like when you start playing the clubs? Tell us a little bit about what those early clubs were like. There's one I'm thinking about, the one you told me about. What's the one with the urinal pipe that just goes?
Oh, that was Walter Mitty's.
Yeah.
That was in Pomona. Yeah, you know, it was in working class city, and you get all the hardworking people who come in and let loose, you know, on the weekends, and it was steady employment. Our dressing room was the bathroom, and the bathroom was a pipe that was attached to a urinal, but there was no plumbing attached to it. So, you know, after the first 4 or 5 visits, you're swimming in it. But as far as, you know, when you see the people are having a good time and you're partially responsible for that, I can't explain to you the feeling you get. It's worth everything. You know, we give up everything to do this again. That's really what the state of mind was.
Will you read? Well, they clap. Will you read just this one paragraph? It's about the clubs. Just that one paragraph.
What we didn't know at the time was there's a way in which the way club days were the pinnacle of our experience on planet Earth. That's when we got the highest highs, because the potential of being great was still out there. That's when the dream of Van Halen was the most magical, because it was still a dream. There's nothing more exciting than thinking you're on the verge of achieving everything you've ever wanted, including achieving it. From a psychological and a Carl Jung perspective, when you reach your goal, that's it, you're done. So don't ever reach your goal. Keep clawing further. Otherwise, there's no incentive, right? So by the time that Ariel and I were talking about this, it gave me time to think about all this, because when Ed was still here, all we did was try to make the next record, which is like I can't explain it. It's other like you have a free, everything is new, it's open. I mean, look at Ed. Have you seen that? Have you seen that? In a musical sense. You know, yeah, you're in a box, a concrete box with fluorescent lights and a bunch of noise, but the potential, I think that's really the word, it's the potential that's out there that you keep looking for. A little further, a little further. And then when you happen on it, it's very fortunate. But most people will tell you that when they have, that's why they say don't rest on your laurels. Because once you do that, there will be no more incentive to go any further. And Ed and I were we beat each up pretty good with going a little further. The risk with going further, of course, is at some point, you've gone too far. And hopefully, you're lucky enough to regroup and go back to what got you there in the first place, if the audience is forgiving enough. It happens all the time.
What's the experience like of going from being kids who are getting 3,000 people, 4,000 people into a backyard and you're rocking them, and it's just the sheer force of your music and your magnetism. What's the experience like going from that to getting what you want?
Again, being musicians is maybe too narrow of a term, but being there and playing, and you think that you're being judged by the way you played. Half the time, people don't even know what you're doing. And I'm not degrading it or making it less, but that is the reality. The other half does know what you're playing. So what they really want is to getting entertainment and something to do to let their emotions out. And ultimately, you have to recognize that the band is there as a catalyst for the audience to get off and have a great time. There are other different layers, of course, and that is you are very critical of how you performed that night. We taped everything, and we'd listen, and you know, oh, man, that sucks, and why'd you do that, and what's this all about? But you can't do that on the fly. You know, you're not going to stop and go, hey, Ed, what's that note you just played? Our basic philosophy was it's not about the notes, it's about the attitude. And that's why Warner Brothers thought that we were a punk rock band when they first signed us. I don't know if, yeah. And that's why the original logo was it looked like a punk rock thing. And Ed and Dave couldn't figure out why was that? Well, it's because, have you seen how they perceive us? You know, besides, we're lumped in with the rest of the kids. In music, the trends that become the predominant trends, whether it's a way of recording, whether it's digital going from analog, or whether it's echo chambers and all of a sudden fuzz pedals are big. It's all a matter of what record is the most successful at the time. And I guarantee you, everybody else will be doing the same thing, okay? And it really is that simple. And there's nothing wrong with it, but it is that simple. I was always told people are pack animals. Maybe animals is the wrong word, but judging what I've seen on TV lately. But anyway, I'll soften the language. We are herd creatures, yeah. So, and that works to the positive for us, because we can guide your most primal and your most guttural instincts into a creative and productive form, if you will. Maybe that's overstating what we do, but that's what we're shooting for. And in the process, hopefully, you will find an artistic outlet for yourself. There's nothing better. Ed used to go crazy about people imitating him. And imitation, Ed, is the first step in being inspired. Because what you really want to do is inspire them to go from the first is the imitation, and after that, you got to take it further. To imitate, yeah, it's wonderful, but that's not really the purpose of why you're doing it. Everything is built on something from before. And if you can go a step further, do that. You're never going to find out how far you can go until you take that step. And that was part of the thing with jump. Take the leap, do it, screw everything else. Just jump, mother. But that was the general feeling of all of us, and that's what made the band stick together. And you're always, there's something new around every corner, If you look at it with a analytical or an emotional angle, there's something in there. I can't put my finger on it, because if you could, we'd bottle it, right?
It sounds a lot like the way you describe looking for when you would be working on music, when you and Ed would be trying to find what you were looking for. It's always just out of reach, right?
Yes.
That's the whole experience of trying to create.
I think it's true with anybody who's quote-unquote creative, whether you're writing or whether you're painting or music. And yeah, there is a risk of going too far. And there's a risk of that if you have certain fans, you'll do something they ain't gonna like. But I can tell you this, if you don't take that step, you will forever go into a downward spiral. It'll get smaller and smaller and smaller and less creative, and you're becoming nothing more than a jukebox. And
that's a perfect segue. So the thing that you've told me about your residency at Gazzari's was that with the years you played at this club on the Sunset, right off the Sunset Strip, or it's on the Sunset Strip?
On the Sunset Strip.
On the Sunset Strip. You guys were playing there. You weren't allowed to play your own music. You were the house band.
We kind of, yeah.
Human jukebox, right?
Human jukebox, yes.
What'd you guys gain from that, though? From those years of just playing together all the time?
We incorrectly thought that if we got a foothold on Sunset Boulevard, that would be our road to success.
How's that incorrect?
Huh?
Well, how's that incorrect? Wasn't it?
Not really, because what happens is when you start drawing a lot of people to these clubs, they keep upping your pay to kind of keep you there. So you're stuck in these clubs forever. If you walk at that time, again, we were taught to be perceptive and look around. And you look around on Sunset Strip, and there's bands that are like 20 years old playing there. They were great musicians, and they were great performers, and a lot of people came to see them. But this is the end of the road for these folks. I'm not knocking it, but that's not what we wanted to do. I'll jump out of a third-story window and land on my head if I have to get the damn, to move to the next level. That's how we felt.
Tell the story of when you were kids and you went to the union, the musicians' union, with your dad.
Oh yeah, we went to the. I'm laughing because it's a side of the music business that most people don't see, and that is all these extremely talented musicians. You name the instrument, they're all there, and they're all looking for work, and they're all wearing their work attire, which is usually a suit that's ill-fitting, and it's been 10 years old, and it's got all the shiny spots on the places where you sit, right? Well, Ed and I were this big, and so guess where our heads are at? What level?
They're at ass level.
Bingo. You know, at that time, Ed and I didn't smoke yet, and the place was filled, you know, littered with cigarettes. But what we learned was, you know, it's kind of a you're not rejected, but if you're playing something that's not marketable, you're screwed. That's really what's at play. And because Ed and I wanted to be professional musicians, you had to read, you had to play a couple of instruments, you had all these number of things, and we did it fairly well. But going down to the local 47, which we eventually became members of, if you can't beat them, join them, right? No, and it was all with all due respect, because there are a lot of hardworking folk. But I looked at Ed and I go, Ed, this doesn't look appealing to me, you know? I mean, in the movies, you see pictures of Beethoven with his hair and the beautiful women, and he's emotional, and right? And here these guys are going, oh man, where's our next gig coming from? So we said, we're not going to do this. So we left, and that was it. We came back, I think, 25 years later, because we had to be union to play on the tour. So,
a member of the audience asked what your parents made of your success. What'd they think when you guys, you know, come back from that first tour?
Where are you? Because this is my mom and dad's reaction. Ali Edward, get a suit. Yeah, to them, having that suit meant success, you know. And it also shows that people's perceptions are different. Then your perception is not entirely accurate, as neither is the other person's perception. But something made my mom think that wearing a suit made you legitimate. So, but no, thank you.
And what'd your dad think? I mean, he was
my
a musician.
dad, you know, music is, we're kind of like, we're rogues, you know, we roam, we're out, we're hustling, we're having fun. You engage with people. You meet such a variety of people on the planet. And it's interesting because at the time, Dave always wanted to be one of them. You know, I was looking for the commonality. What's the common denominator between all these different countries, ethnicities, religious beliefs, you name it? And believe it or not, one of the strongest common denominators was rock and roll. I'm serious. You can go anywhere on the planet.
You got into this thing like pretty much from you get signed. Well, before we go into that, you get signed. You put out the record that makes everyone fall in love with you. That's, you know, this classic record. You and Ed couldn't stand it at first.
No.
Tell us why.
Again, it's a matter of perception. It's a matter of where you have your mind and how you think it's going to sound. And it's like anything else in life. Whether it's the Christmas present from Santa Claus, it's not the one you asked for, the sound we got on that record was not what we were shooting for.
Because it was too what?
It was not live enough in terms of having the old recording techniques, and I used probably Led Zeppelin as the example 100 times too many in the book, but they really were the top of the game. They understood the technology of how to record stuff in the studio. They understood the balance between having a coordinated song written, but leaving enough room to improvise. You know, you don't want to have something that's the same every time. And combining all these elements into something that is professionally and artistically that you can be proud of is something that we shoot for. You don't always get it, but if you don't make the effort, I can guarantee you ain't gonna make it. And you know, Ed and I were primarily at the time that we were signed, disco was huge. So good luck on getting a good drum sound. A lot of good drum sound records, but not for rock and roll. So it was a constant battle. And the first time we walked into the studio, I had just got my brand new Ludwig's Monster drums. I mean, it has a huge kick. This was at a time when the drum companies would send you the drums tuned, polished. I mean, they were flawless. I sat there and I smelled the glue for 2 days. And, so anyway, I brought them in, and the first thing Don says to me, he says, take the front heads off. I'm looking at him going, you got to be out of here. What's wrong with you, right? And after a while, you realize that people are in their own little method of doing things. I'm not disrespecting him, but I can tell you this, I ain't going to get the sound I want unless I have a drum makes sound from resonance. And, yeah. So the battle went on and on and on. It wasn't until the third record that we finally started making, because I think Don was, besides being Ted's assistant.
He's talking about Don Landy. I'm sure you all know this, but
Oh, yeah.
the engineer.
Nothing but the utmost respect and kudos for him. He's a freaking genius, that man. But you know what? I don't like the way it sounds. But I tell you what, he was, the challenge was enough for him to try to incorporate everything we wanted and make it work. He didn't just say, no, screw you, we're going to do it this way. That's not who he was. So the ride was incredible. It also shows that if you don't go a little, it's the same thing. If you don't go a little further, you ain't going to get it. It took Ed to build that studio for us to finally get a record that sounded almost what we wanted. Thank God we didn't get it, because we would have stopped.
So again, I think you probably all know this. You're talking about 1984.
Yes.
That's your favorite, because a member of the audience wants to know what's your favorite album. And
Well, in terms of effort, you never know what the outcome is going to be. We did 100% of every record we made. We didn't skimp. We didn't phone it in. Why would we do that? We're lucky enough to be able to make records. Let's play it. Let's do this at the top of our game. The thing was, we didn't want to make a technically perfect record, because that's not what music is. People aren't perfect. Music's not perfect. And now they actually have a name for it, where you leave something out and it does something. I forgot the whole concept. It was like a wabi-sabi. It's when things are not perfect, then it becomes more human, because all art is a reflection of us, whether we're aware of it or not. Our deepest, most secret thoughts and being, or thoughts of, come forth. And I'm not just talking about the Rorschach test. In music, these things come out. Your character comes into the play, and that's part of the reason why it's so difficult to perform and have your music critiqued by people who most people don't really know what the hell they're talking about, because this is your soul. You're attacking my soul. Let me talk to you. But that's also that's also part of the, and I'm not making this acceptable behavior or preaching that you should do it, but this is part of the reason why there's so much drug use in the creative arts, because you're being judged on your soul. Who the hell wants that? So, and that's the depth of what we do. And I think, to say that asking a girl that and she says no, that's nothing compared to somebody who goes, your music sucks.
Don't you think the other reason that substance abuse is so common, creative people, artists, is because you're trying to get into another state?
Yes.
I mean, that's a lot of the time, I feel like, besides have fun, you guys were trying to get into a different state where you could follow.
Yeah, we did microdosing and all that. It was just to get the same wavelength as Dave. And I say that with nothing but love, man. I mean it. But there's an old expression, I think it's in the book, and it says, no great poetry was ever written by the drinker of water. It seems to be, every culture, every art has some sort of something that needs to be a little bit off from the norm. And yeah, drugs, they bite you on the other end. That's the one thing that nobody really believes is going to happen. The old song about Jack Johnson going down to the crossroads to cut a deal with the devil, it's true. It may be a metaphor, but if you sign on for that, and the metaphor is that the drug will kill you, it'll distort everything to the point where you don't know what's up and down, and then you die. That's it. It's a sad ending. when it really doesn't have to be that way. I'm not talking from a position of being superior or a position of knowing more. I've been in and out of rehab 10 times. Okay, 8. I can only count to 4. But I'm joking about it because I came out the other end. Ed fought it his whole life. Ed was very brave all the way up to the end.
A member of the audience wants to know, does Ed come to you in your dreams? And if so, like, what are the interactions like?
Well, there's a superstition that if you say how it's done, that portal will close.
Oh, well, you don't want to take that risk.
Huh?
Then don't say.
No,
That's too dangerous.
I'm not. Well, it's not dangerous, but I like that he communicates a little bit. There are several schools of thought about what happens to a soul once they enter a different existence, if you will. And now that people are more comfortable talking about whether it's Buddhism or any of the other beliefs about transcendence, even though transcendence has nothing to do with death, from a scientific standpoint, and they can say this definitively, energy cannot be destroyed. It can only change. So in that sense, Ed, dinner's on.
What has the experience? What have you learned from losing him, from grieving that loss?
That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that. I take a lot of things for granted, as we do. When you do things on a repetitive basis, the touring schedule of how we played and what we did became very repetitive. And if you're not careful, you'll stop paying attention. I have some music that was left behind, and I listen to it, and I tell you, it tears my heart out. I can't even verbalize it, but I am going to take some of that music and make something with it, out of it. It was stuff that Ed had written and that we had worked on. But again, the most important thing is I'm not going to try to pretend to be him, or meaning getting a guitarist to imitate him. I've even tried AI to see if the patterns of how he plays. You can't do it. Ed was unique. He was individual. There was only one Ed. But having said that, the name Unfinished came from a song or a piece of music by Franz Schubert. And it was he didn't finish the song. So there were several musicians or composers who finished the song for him. And it was, it's a strange way of all these things coming together at one time. That song was my father's favorite song. Either that or it was the only record he had. It was ingrained in us from a very early state. So it all kind of came together, and that's why we named that last song that Ed and I worked on Unfinished. It was just in honor of the lineage from my dad to Ed to me and to Wolf, and so on and so forth. But having said that, if I immerse myself in the music, I can kind of visualize where he would have gone with it. I know his phrasing. I know he basically plays the sixes, and nobody could figure that out because every time that they try to count, hey, it doesn't add up. It doesn't go. Well, of course not. It wasn't meant to add up. Ed just plays the way he feels, and then you figure it out later. That was actually a Miles Davis quote. He'll play first, and then you figure out what I played. That's the magic and the beauty of being in the moment with music. And Ed did that all the time. So in the long and short of it, if I can make him proud of whatever it is that we're trying to put together, then we'll do that. But if it's less than the level of what we were used to, then it probably would not be a good idea. In any event, the music will always be under lock and key, and maybe 20, 30 years from now, Wolf wants to do something with it. I don't know. But I want to do it right with Ed. I know what we were working on, and it was a little bit different than what people are used to, but it was more of a sonic experiment, if you will. I wish I could play you some of it, man. It'll knock your socks off. It's great. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
You know,
yeah.
just hum it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
A lot of times, you told me when we were working on this, you would say, you know, talking about music is like dancing about architecture.
Yeah, that's an old expression because music is a vehicle for. It's almost like a what do you call it?
A viral way of spreading emotion.
Yeah, well, a viral way of communicating emotion to one another. Talking about it is a different medium. You know, it takes cerebral input, and it takes talking itself is a medium. You have poetry. Poetry is different from, right? Music itself is what it is, and to try to define it by using a different language doesn't make any sense. But if you want people to listen to yourself, you may have to use that way to get it into the populace. See? That's the real reason you do it. You want as many people as possible to listen to your music. And if you have to write about it so that people go, hey, I've heard about that, I think I'll buy that, then you do that.
Okay, so we did that.
Yeah. I'm sorry if I go off on these wacky tangents, but man, I have tapes of conversations where Ed and I get into it, man. It's like we're in a different universe, and not all good.
Do you think he would like the book?
Yeah, I think he would. You know, Ed was more of a he'd rather play. It was really that simple from the very beginning. He said many times, I hate doing interviews, but it was part of the job description. We would like nothing better than just to play. Unfortunately, you can't do just that.
Okay, so you may not. We'll see if this works. We're gonna do an experiment. Given all that, can you put into words, or something adjacent to it, what you think you and Ed accomplished?
You know, Ed, what? You know, Ed was a very humble person because when he was asked where the music came from, he says, I don't know. It comes through me. And like he was a channel or something. And you know, I don't know if it's the drugs talking or whether it was just, I had to throw that in because the reality is I know exactly what Ed's talking about, but the moment you try to analyze and get critical and critique it, it goes away. It's a really strange connection you have with wherever it comes from, wherever this vibration or this sound. And I know that scientists will say, well, it's the accumulation of the 900 records you listened previous and you combine them with this and that. It could very possibly be, but no. You know, the real magic that you can never capture comes from, I don't know. And Ed has said that many times.
You think you'll see Ed again on the other side?
Yeah, when I see him, I'm going to kick his ass.
Okay. Well, that's what we're going to end on, because that's where we ended the book. Thank you guys for being a great audience.
Thank you.